All right, welcome everybody to Network 2020's discussion about the new Russian diaspora. It's a pleasure to be here today. I know last week didn't work out, but I think that there are some advantages in that we now have our full panel. People who weren't able to participate last week will hopefully be able to participate this week, and we look forward to a very good discussion. So thank you all for bearing with last week. We are very pleased to have some wonderful panelists with us today. Before I introduce them, I just wanted to say a few words about Network 2020. So we're a nonprofit organization. We're really focused on bridging the gap between the private sector and the international affairs community. We run a number of different programs, including these discussions, which are free and open to the public around the world. And we're really just hoping to create more nuanced conversation around global events. And so I appreciate everyone for showing up and being here, as well as to our panelists. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists today. First, we have Irina Borogan. She is a non-resident senior fellow with the Center for European Policy Analysis and is an investigative journalist, co-founder and deputy editor of Agenta.ru, a watchdog of the Russian Secret Services activities. So welcome, Irina. Pleasure to have you here. We also have Olga Irisova. She's a political analyst and co-founder and editor-in-chief at Riddle, which is an online journal of Russian affairs. And her work really focuses on Russian media policy. So welcome to you, Olga. And last but not least, we have Izabella Tabarovsky. She is the Kennan Institute Senior Advisor on Regional Partnerships and Program, where she oversees the Institute's regional partnerships, programming, and independent journalism initiatives, and its historical memory initiative. So welcome, Izabella. And we are very lucky to have Network 2020 Senior Advisor, Joanna Waszewski, moderating the conversation today. And she's a nonprofit management consultant, and she has held positions in a variety of sectors and always brings a lot of good substantive weight and has been writing a lot about the invasion of Ukraine as well. So welcome to you, Joanna. And with that, I will turn it over to you, and we look forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Courtney. Well, the Russian invasion of Ukraine led not only to the mass migration of Ukrainians escaping the conflict, but also to a large emigration of Russian citizens. At the beginning of the war, many left for political and economic reasons, fearing further crackdowns, arrest, or loss of opportunity. Last September, a second wave, this time mostly men, left to avoid being drafted under Vladimir Putin's partial mobilization. It is estimated that more than 500,000 Russians have temporarily resettled, mostly in the former Soviet space of Armenia, Kazakhstan, Georgia, the Baltic States, as well as in Turkey, Dubai, and Europe. Who are these emigres, and how do they hope to influence civil society in Russia? How have they adapted to and impacted their host countries? And what are their plans for a post-Putin Russia? I look forward to discussing these and other questions today with our expert panel. So let me begin. The first question will be for Irina and Olga, and I'll start with you, Irina. As recent emigres yourselves, can you describe who are these new emigres? Are they mostly opposition leaders, or do they reflect different sectors of society? And also, if you could please describe your own personal experiences. So, Irina?
The first emigrants were Russian oligarchs, ironically, people who started fighting the Kremlin and Putin in early 2000. It was Vladimir Gusinsky, who was the owner of his TV channel, and it was quite independent TV. And then Boris Berezovsky, who was initially a huge supporter of Vladimir Putin, and then split with him and was expelled from the country and left Russia. And Mikhail Khodorkovsky followed these people. And after that, like in since 2008 and until 2020, there were not a lot of immigrants. It was a small group of people who were opposition politicians like Garry Kasparov, and independent journalists and NGO people, activists who found themselves in danger. They left Russia, but it was a relatively small group of people. In 2020, in 2021, we saw a kind of big group of independent journalists who left the country. It was literally many independent investigative journalist project left country, like iStories project and a team called Team 29, who is a group of people who consists of journalists and as well as lawyers. So all these people were, I mean, all these investigative journalists, they were put under investigation. That's why they left the country. They understood that they can't work in the country anymore. And then the war started, and it prompted it prompted thousands of people left the country. Who are these people? Of course, most of independent journalists, they were forced out of the country because the legislation adopted after the war started was just crazy, and you can't call a war a war, and you can't walk without limitations. So you have to leave. Opposition politicians also left, and by the same reasons, and independent bloggers, intelligentsia, liberal professors, even Instagrammers, TikTokers, people who want to be free and who are quite far from politics. They also felt like they need to leave urgently, because the conditions the country found itself, the people found themselves in the country after the war started was just terrible, because you can tell freely, you can post any stuff which is not just anti-Kremlin, which is just kind of alternative of the Kremlin point of view. And it became very difficult to stay in the country if you want to be free, and even if you are independent TikTokers, because even TikTokers were punished by the Kremlin, and in a very disgusting way. So it's by different estimates, it's a group of these immigrants. It's like 500 from by different estimates. They are from 500,000 people to 1 million people, and we can see a huge group or among this number of people, which is kind of distinctive. That's IT people, IT businessmen, and programmers. There are, according to the government statistics, there are around 1,000 people. So, and these people left Russia because it's difficult to work for American and European countries staying in Russia, and also because of mobilization, because all men between ages 20 and 55, they can be mobilized. So that's the biggest wave of emigration from the end of the World War II. So it was, I say that because I wrote with my co-author Andrei Soldatov, I wrote a book called The Compatriots, which is about the complicated relationship between the Russian emigration and the Kremlin. Usually I say here that was a bad idea to write this book, because when we published this book 3 years ago, there was a relatively small group of people who emigrated, but after the February 2020, it seems to me like, I mean, half of Moscow emigrated. So not a good idea. Okay. About my experience.
Yes.
A few words. I left the country. I did not emigrate. I had no idea that I left the country for a long time back then. I left Russia in 2020, in the end of 2020, because my colleague and partner, Andrei Soldatov, and I, we found ourselves in under threat. The situation was very dangerous. We run a website called agentura.ru, which is a watchdog of the Russian security services, and we have been investigating the security services activities for 20 years. And for this period of time, we found several times we were put under investigations, and we were interrogated by the FSB, which is a major security service in Russia, and we were interrogated by the prosecutor office. So it happened with us, and that was an unpleasant experience. But in 2020, we learned that under agentura.ru, our website, had a media license. And we found out that we lost, that our license was cancelled. And Andrei tried to check what happened, and he found out that the person who obtained this license was pronounced dead by the Russian censorship agency. The reason why they canceled our license was the death of a person, who obtained the license, which was Andrei. So we read the sign as a final kind of dangerous situation. Mm-hmm. So we decided to leave for a while. And you know what happens next?
Yeah, no, that's it's extraordinary story. Olga, how about yourself? What can you talk a bit about your emigre community and your own personal experience?
Thank you. So to begin with, I just want to know that starting from 2010 till 2020, around 3 million of Russians left the country, approximately 300,000 per year. But in the first 5 months after the start of the war, in February last year, already, according to the official Russian estimates, 454,000 people left. So I would assume that by the end of the last year, around 1 million people left. And Joanna was absolutely right, talking about 2 waves of migration from Russia, but some experts would even say that there were 3 waves. One that started after February 24th last year till summer. This were predominantly people with active political background who decided to leave the country because of the fear of repression, because they didn't want to pay taxes in order not to fund the war. Then in the summer, there was the second wave of migration, and mostly people were better prepared, so they did have a chance to sell their property, to find the money, to sort out their things, and they immigrated in summer. And then on 21st of September, the so-called partial mobilization was announced in Russia, and it triggered lots of people without any active political stand in the past to lead the country because of the fear of being mobilized. So now, when I'm talking about migration, I really love, and about Russian society in general, I really love to build my analysis based on sociological data, on surveys. Unfortunately, when it comes to the new wave of migration from Russia, it's almost impossible because the data is very inconclusive. There are some research available, but methodologically they are inconclusive. But I can refer to one survey that was conducted by the team of sociologists called themselves OK Russians. And they found out that according to their estimates, those who immigrated before September last year, before mobilization, comprised mostly of people with IT background and those who had experience working in artistic communities, such as like theaters, media, etc., etc. But around 45% of them were actually people working in IT industry. So as Joanna already noted, majority of those left the country, they settled down in Turkey, Georgia, Armenia, Kazakhstan. Then a few months after the start of the war, Israel greatly simplified its repatriation procedure. So a lot of Russians with Hebrew background, they managed to leave the country and settle themselves down in Israel. So when it comes to the reasons why people decided to leave the country, according to OK Russians, a lot of people noted not only the fear of repressions, but also the fear for their economic stability. Then another large group of those who decided to migrate before the start of mobilization comprised of the people with serious health issues, because these people were afraid that under the sanctions, some medications would not be available for them or for their children. So people with serious health issues also comprised a large part of the second wave of current migration. So what else? We can also say that those that have been leaving the country since February last year, they are better off financially than previous waves of migration, and then Russian population in general. They have better education than Russian population in general, and they are younger. So the median, the average age of migrants, the current migrants, is around 35 years old, while the average age in Russia now is 45 years old. So the country is losing their, I wouldn't say the best people, but obviously like the youngers, those who can contribute to the economy and to the development of the country. So speaking about my own background, I left the country after annexation of Crimea in 2014. But up till the last year, I was able to go back to Russia to do my research, to do my field trip, to visit my relatives. But after the start of the war, the online journal analytical platform that I've been managing, first of all, it was blocked in Russia in spring 2022. And then in November, Russian government declared us to be undesirable organization, which would mean 6 years, up to 6 years in prison for me. So that's why now I cannot go back to Russia and have to imagine my life somewhere else. But we will talk about it later, I think. Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you. No, that's a very difficult prospect to come to terms with, I am sure. Now turning to you, Izabella, are there historic parallels to previous periods of such Russian emigration?
Well, you know, a lot of parallels have been made, actually, very strikingly, to the period that followed the Bolshevik Revolution, which I guess would tell you about the scale, the perceived scale of the catastrophe really that's happening to the Russian society. So between 1917 and 1921, up to 2 million people fled the Bolshevik regime, a wide variety of people. And, it's interesting, as I was listening to Olga and Irina, it's illustrative of actually how little we know about the current crisis, because I've actually seen numbers that suggest that possibly up to 2 million people have left Russia now over the past year. We actually don't know, but up to 1 million for sure. That's very clear. So the numbers are actually comparable. A comparison has been made. What happened after the Bolshevik Revolution at some point is that the so-called philosophers' ships were kind of put out into the world. So the Bolshevik regime put all of the intelligentsia that was dissident, that disagreed with it, on these philosopher ships, and literally sailed them, send them out to other countries. So that happened for sure with this current wave of the emigration, as the previous speakers emphasized. Intelligentsia has left. But I also want to say that there's something else that makes me think of this similarity with that period. And that is a complete destruction of civil society institutions. Russia arrived at the end of the, first of all, I can't even think of another country in the 20th century that experienced as much institutional destruction over a period of 100 years, because the entire institutional structure was changed during the Bolshevik Revolution. Then when the Soviet Union fell apart, again, the country was essentially an institutional wasteland, because, of course, one of the characteristics of a totalitarian society is that there aren't any independent civil society structures. And so then in the following 30 years, Russians have built up an incredible network of institutions, historical memory institutions, amazing independent journalism institutions, and I think sometimes for Americans, it can be hard to appreciate it. I actually was looking up some of the longevity of some of the American institutions. you have newspapers that are 200 years old, you have banks that are 300 years old or something like that. In Russia, there was nothing that was older than 30 years, really, institutionally speaking, in terms of civil society institutions. And now everything is destroyed over again, right? As in March of last year, everything was just destroyed. And so I think that this is a major, major loss for Russia, along with the brain drain. And maybe we'll talk about it a bit more. I think Olga mentioned that. So it's from the position of a civil society, I would say, perspective of civil society, it's been nothing short of catastrophic for Russia. And I think that the new immigrants, in a way, some of those who had been in opposition to the regime and who choose to remain so in emigration, because not everybody was politically active of those who left, right? There were IT people who left because they want to continue working in the IT sector and they couldn't continue doing it in Russia. But those who were politically active, for now at least, they choose to remain politically active and to fight the regime from outside. And that perhaps is the best hope, that kind of the seeds of active civil society in Russia will remain, right? Because they can continue communicating their ideas over to Russia. And if and when they manage to come back, they can become the seed of a rebirth and regrowth. But for now, inside of Russia, it's, I would say it's pretty much empty from my perspective, if we just talk about independent institutions that are not affiliated with the state.
All right, well, thank you so much. And then following on about civil society, how you impact it within Russia, Olga and Irina, what is being done? What are the emigres doing, like yourself and journalists like yourself, to try to influence public opinion in civil society in Russia? What are some of the challenges and what are the opportunities to influence? So I'll start with you, Olga, on that one.
Thank you. It's a hard question. And of course, not everything should be said aloud. From what I can say, people who chose to stay politically active and who want to influence public opinion inside of Russia, we are still trying to build the bridges with those Russians who stay inside the country, because most of their independent media, I would dare to say, for now, all of the independent media have been blocked inside of Russia. So now we are trying to find ways to channel our content to Russia without paywalls, without using VPN, because of course, after the start of the war, the number of people in Russia who are using VPN services skyrocketed, but still the majority of population, they don't use VPNs in order to access information about political information and news content. So we are trying to build new strategies on how to address Russians inside of Russia. We're also trying to research the preferences in media consumption in Russia, so that we can target people inside of Russia more successfully, providing them with the type of content they want to see, making this content more interesting for them. Then currently I live in Germany, and I can tell you about one initiative that, in my opinion, has a very great potential. Last year in I think it was November or late November or early December, there was a Congress of anti-war initiatives, of Russian anti-war initiatives held in Berlin. And a lot of small initiatives, small civil society initiatives were represented in this Congress. And I would contradict Izabella a little bit. She said that in Russia, when it comes to civil society institutions, everything is empty. I would say that the start of the war boosted the process of creating new organizations that are not institutionalized, but they are still there. People are trying to do what they can in order to support Ukrainian refugees that were forced to move to Russia, or they're trying to sabotage military activities of the Russian state. They are uniting their strengths, their resources in order to keep others updated with what's going on the front line and inside of Russia. So a lot of things are happening. And one of the big goal of Russians outside of Russia is to keep in touch with the Russians inside of Russia, because we who are outside, we have an opportunity to speak freely. We have opportunity to communicate with Western politicians, with Western organizations. We can advocate the interests of those Russians, the Russians in general, and Russians inside of Russia. They are better off in terms of understanding the context of what's going on inside of the country. So in the foreseeable future, they will be a valuable source of information for all of us who are outside the country. So the main goal of us now should be to build the bridge between Russians inside of Russia and the outside world, because for them, for those who either chose to stay there or did not have any opportunity to leave, and there are a lot of people like that who wanted to leave but just did not have any means to do that. So they feel that they are being trapped there, and we should do everything that is possible in order to represent them in the West, not only represent us. So that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And Irina, how are you trying to, you and people that you know are trying to influence public really opinion, which can be political in Russia?
I do the same as I did in Russia. I keep going to support my website agentura.ru, and I do the same. I gather information about the Russian security services. I check this information. I investigate their activity and put all the stuff on our website. And after the war started, we feel that we need more audience, and we launched a Telegram channel, which back then got immediately for 3 days 6,000 subscribers. Now it's less; it's 46,000. So people started getting tired of the war and started to unsubscribe. But 46,000 people for the website, which is run by 2 people, it's a lot. And so I try to publish story in the Western media and give interviews, and I mean do the same that I did in Russia. So this is nothing special. The main challenge, the major challenge for me and for other journalists, that we are not in Russia, and we're physically not present in Russia. We can talk to people directly. We can see what's going on, and we have to communicate with our sources via encrypted messengers and other technical tools, which is, I mean, not the same as physical contact. So this is a new challenge, but there is no way, there is no other way. So we have to adapt ourselves to this situation. About my colleagues, they're doing a great work. Media which emigrated and relaunched themselves abroad, like Medusa relocated a little bit late or earlier, but most of their journalists moved after the war started, moved abroad after the war started. So Medusa, Mediazona, TV Rain, and people from Echo Moskvy, which stopped its operation in Russia, but their hosts, they went to Vilnius, which is in Lithuania, and launched their YouTube channels, their own YouTube channels, and they continue broadcast. They broadcast every day, daily. And Navalny's people also, who relocated before the war, like 1 year before the war, they are doing a fantastic job of investigating corruption. And all Russian investigative journalist project who moved abroad, they're still doing what they're doing, because about them, particular, they're operating they're dealing with data analysis and with data investigation. So for them, it's not a huge difference where to be located, unlike me, who is dealing with people. So I mean, it's very, very sad. And maybe 30 or 20 years ago, it would be impossible to operate from abroad, being a journalist. But right now, thanks to the internet, and thanks to the social media and YouTube, especially, it's possible. And all these journalists, all these hosts, all these bloggers, they have millions and millions of viewers and subscribers, which is a great number. In comparison with the Soviet Union times, with the Soviet times, when people could get access to immigrants' media abroad, but it was kind of difficult because the authorities try to suppress signal, and all these radio stations was not easy to listen to. But right now it's easy. You just all of this media, they're blocked. But at the same time, there are a lot of VPNs, and Russians started using them even before the war. So they can They can watch YouTube, they can read Medusa, they can read Agentura.ru, they can read our Telegram channel. So that's no problem anymore.
That's great. So
but-
there's a way. So sorry. So there obviously technology is giving a way to reach people then.
Yeah, it is great.
Mhm.
And there was a question about opportunities. Right now we have a problem with audience in terms of social classes. So our audience, all independent audience, they work for liberal middle class, which is a lot of people. It is a driving force of the society, but it is limited amount of people. But as journalists, we were trained to get as much audience as we can. And right now, I mean that at the moment when we can attract more people because they get fed up with the Kremlin propaganda, it is coming soon. So I feel like this. I'm not sure. Couldn't be any statistics or all analysis during the war. I mean, prognosis are kind of useless, but I feel that we will get more people because the Kremlin propaganda the Kremlin propaganda on the backdrop of not economic crisis, but worsening conditions and cost of living crisis may be very useful for people, and they can at some point they will want to know the truth, so that they are our audience. I think we can get them the next maybe to the end of this year, maybe the next year.
All
So
right,
they will be ours people.
all right,
That's
thank you.
my hope.
Yes, no, I can understand. And Olga, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, just a quick observation. We tried to study their behavior of Russian media consumers. Of course, it's kind of hard right now to do that being outside of Russia. But the interest towards so-called alternative information, and by alternative I mean not official, not Kremlin propaganda, it has been rising since the start of the war. So people are getting more and more interested in learning the truth and finding out a different version, different from the Kremlin's version of reality. But the problem is that most liberal media, they talk to their audience using the liberal language, and the majority of people who are still not consuming independent media but want to know the truth and are seeking for this truth, they feel underrepresented by even by independent media. And now we are trying to find out what are these negative and positive triggers. And by negative triggers, I mean even like the words that media and we like as an expert or an analytical community are using in order to address the audience. And some words might be perceived as negative triggers by this large audience. So for example, when they would hear the word let's say annexation or some other words, they might feel that we are talking not with them, and but we are talking with ourselves. So they would immediately switch into something else and regard us as something not for them. So that's now actually a tricky question, how we as people addressing large audience, as experts, as journalists, as professors, as academia workers, how we can crush this breach, how we can address, how we can capture this larger audience, and which language shall we use in order for those people to feel safe with us, to feel that we represent them as well as liberal intelligentsia. Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you for that clarification. And then
I just want to say something
yes,
because
please.
it's a really important point that Olga made, because it's an issue, it's an issue for the independent journalist community as a whole of how to speak to broader audience inside Russia, how to reach the broader audience in Russia, because the goal is to bring them over. Right? Navalny people talk about it all the time, that you have to be speaking to people in ways that persuades them to come to your side, so that they don't feel alienated from the way you speak, right, as an opponent of the regime. But for the media that is placed outside Russia, it creates dilemmas. So there was recently a problem with TV Rain, as everybody on this call knows, when they were, I believe they were still broadcasting from Riga, and they said something that was, one of the hosts said something that was awkwardly phrased, but came across as if he was supporting Russian soldiers who are fighting in Ukraine. He was trying to communicate kind of a human concern. It was badly phrased, but it really created a backlash, a political backlash inside Latvia, because it made people feel like, well, here are these Russians, and this goes straight to the topic of our meeting today, right? That here are these Russians, they are coming in, they claim that they are opposition, but they're not. Look at what they're saying. And it was completely overblown, and it was an overreaction. But the truth is that these kinds of reactions do crop up. I think that they are unreasonable, and I think that this is local politicians potentially just using the opportunity for grandstanding or to advance their own political goals, because there really aren't Putin's supporters among the people who had to flee over the past year. But that danger exists.
Great, thank you. So actually now I'm going to look at our Q&A box, because we're getting short on time. And one of the questions actually is a follow-on to what you were just saying, Izabella. For the million of people who have left Russia, are they stateless? What are their relationships like with their host countries? Are they entitled to social services? What is the relationship? What is the support like? And are some countries more receptive than others?
Well, this is a really, really important question. It's something that I spend a lot of time talking about. In May, I was at a conference of independent journalists in Montenegro, and everybody, so this was just a few months after the war, and really everybody was talking about their difficulties with getting legalized in the countries where they landed. It was a major issue. People couldn't get, their credit cards got cut off because of the sanctions and accompanying private boycotts. So they ended up abroad overnight without money, without being able to access any bank accounts, and they were not able to open bank accounts. And you know how it is today. If you can't open a bank account, you can't get paid. Right. So they were having a hard time, figuring out their status. I think some of these issues got resolved for some of them. I'm sure that for others, they are ongoing, and it very much differs from country to country, which is why sometimes when people have a choice, when they didn't have to flee overnight, they would kind of think about it and go to a country that was more friendly and maybe more open. Interestingly, just kind of as a little quirky fact, but a number of Russian women who are pregnant have chosen to go to Argentina. We actually published a piece by somebody who chose to go to Argentina because in Argentina, they knew that their child would get an immediate legalization, become a citizen, and so then the whole family could stay. And I think that it's an issue that I find kind of the apathy toward this issue in the United States and Western Europe a little bit perplexing, because it's almost as if, well, we don't want any Russians. There are even opinions like, well, you Russians should just go back to Russia, figure yourselves out and remove Putin's regime and then come back, talk to us. It's very perplexing because, for example, during the Cold War, we were able to tell the difference between, Brezhnev and Sakharov, right? We knew that there were Russian exiles who should be given asylum, and who could in fact help the Western society with its goals, right? There were plenty of Soviet emigres who worked in Radio Free Europe and Voice of America and all kinds of other organizations that helped to kind of stand up to the Soviet regime. And I think something like this could happen today as well. And yet we have so many Russians, at Canon, we used to bring for years and for decades, fellows from Russia, for Soviet Union, who would come and spend time in Washington at the Canon Institute. And now we're having a really hard time getting visas for people, So I think it's very short-sighted. I know that Russian scientists often can't get visas to come to the United States. And guess where they go if they can't come to the United States? They go to China, because China is offering them better economic conditions. It offers them, obviously, no problems with visa regimes. As somebody said to me recently, it becomes an issue of national security if Russian scientists start to go to China or other countries that are not kind of, our allies.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for that. There is another question about the secret services, or the police services. Should the emigres be afraid of Russian special services being abroad, or are they afraid of Putin's retribution? I don't know if Olga or Izabella, Olga or Irina, if you would like to respond to that question.
I think this question is better be addressed by Irina, but
I think we might have lost her.
Yeah, unfortunately, we lost her. So from my own perspective, which I in my own research, I'm not focusing on this issue. So I would say that certainly politicians, opposition politicians who left Russia, they should be worried about FSB and SVR or other Russian security services. We all know about the cases when people were poisoned by Russian security services, even though these people were not in Russia at that time. We all remember the case of Skripal's case, when he and accidentally his daughter were poisoned in the United Kingdom, and there are many more cases like that. But in general, I would say for the majority of the new wave of migrants, Russian security services are not that much of the threat when they are stationed in the US or in European Union countries. But if they live, let's say, in Georgia or in other countries, which security services have close cooperation with Russian security services, that might be a threat. Just recently, 2 of my close friends were denied entry to Georgia, where they have been living since the start of the war. So the Georgian authorities just did not let them in the country, even though their families are there. They rent apartments there. They pay taxes there. So, but it turns out that there was some sort of list of undesirable people, or people who are especially interested for Russian security services, and Georgian security services denied them an entry to the country. So this is threatening, and also those of us who are under criminal prosecution in Russia, we should be afraid of going to such countries with close ties to Russian government and Russian security services. And the problem is that sometimes people just do not know that they are under criminal prosecution until they cross the border, and then they got deported to Russia. So that's why I would say, like, the threat is real, it is there, and we should pay close attention to what's happening around us, especially those who live outside of safe zone of Western liberal democracies.
Thank you. And then we have this one actually for you, Izabella. there was already a serious demographic problem in Russia before the war. What implications does this outflow plus losses in the war have for Russia?
Well, I don't have any numbers. I don't know if anybody has studied it yet. It's all very fresh. I mean, I can only say that it's not, it doesn't bode well, but that's really the extent to which I can express it.
Okay, all right. And let's see what else there is. I have a question. How do emigres see the future of Russia, one without Putin? Maybe let me start with you then, Izabella. What do they think will be the most important factor in achieving a Russia without Putin?
Well, I don't know, Olga, do you want to take it on as an emigre? I think you may, in fact, have.
I can start. So, but like to begin with, I cannot. I can talk only from my own perspective, just because we are all different people and we all have different visions of Russia without Putin. But to begin with, we need to end this war. And this is like the first and ultimate goal, to end this war, to pay reparations to Ukraine, to apologize and do whatever we can so that Ukraine would be safe. And also we need to build a whole like information work constructed with the goal to explain Russians inside of Russia what has been happening with their own country since early 2000s, because Kremlin propaganda is very effective, and people, unfortunately, some of them still do believe that Russia is fighting against Nazis in Ukraine, and without Putin, we cannot just start building, like liberal democracy or everything that I want to my country to be. Just because, first of all, we will have to work with the public opinion. We will have to explain people what went wrong, how they were delusioned about many things, how the government lied them, and we need to persuade them. We need to explain them why the liberal democratic society, it would be of the benefit to them as well.
All right, thank you. And then
And I just want to
yes,
add that I think that, I mean, what Olga is saying, that there isn't sort of a single view, and again, because so much still needs to happen before we can get to that. And I think one of the, perhaps, I don't know, increasingly, perhaps I would say, there is a realization that it's perhaps an illusion to think that as soon as Putin is gone, then everything, this whole structure that he has built with all these laws and persecution of every independent thinker, that it will fall and everybody will be able to come back. Because it is, it's just as Olga says, there is a sort of a structure of support for, he wouldn't be able to do it if he weren't able to gather a certain amount of support from the Russian population. And that support is built on lies. But, it's not so easy to just come and tell people, well, this was all built on lies. You have to think differently. So I think, unfortunately, from my most recent kind of conversations with new immigrants, new political exiles, I think a realization is setting in that it is perhaps going to be a longer struggle, and that they're not out of the country for just a little bit, that they will need to settle in, and they will need to find a way to live in these new societies while continuing to do the work that they're doing. But it's not just in and out. There needs to be a longer kind of strategy and longer term vision.
Right. Well, thank you very much for that. And then I'm glad you're back, Irina. because I have a question that was asked earlier and Olga gave her response, but it's about the secret services. You know, how as an emigre, is that must be something that you think about, you know, what they could do, you're being abroad, you know, any fears of retribution by Putin. Can you talk a little bit about that? I think Irina might be frozen. Oh, what a shame. All right. Well, hopefully she'll still be able to join us. We have a few minutes left, and I really wanted to cover a question about what should the international community be doing to help the new Russian diaspora, and why is it so important to do so? So if we could begin with you, Olga. What can the international community be doing to help?
That's an excellent and very important question. Thank you for asking it. So to begin with, they all struggle with legalization. By we, I mean Russian emigres. We all struggle with legalization. I've been living in Germany for more than a year, and I cannot open a bank account here just because I'm a Russian passport holder, even though I've left the country. I left the country in 2014. Still, it's a huge struggle for me. And every year I have to find new ways to extend my documents, extend my working visas. And it's very time consuming, and it's very stressful, and it prevents us from concentrating on our work. So if the international community can somehow simplify the procedure for Russian journalists, Russian academia members, Russian experts, Russian and NGO representatives, so that they can obtain sort of either humanitarian visas or work permits, that would be very helpful. Then also, unfortunately, I would have to say that we mostly now depend on outside funding, the foreign funding, because after we've been blocked in Russia, and especially after we've been recognized as undesirable organization in Russia, we cannot get any finances from inside of Russia, because that would mean criminal prosecution for anyone who would dare to support us financially. And in that under that circumstances, we have to rely on the support of international community. And by we here, I don't only mean Riddle, the journal I'm working with. I mean like all the organizations that Russians now are operating from abroad. So this is a common problem for all of us. But then there is also issue with visas. All of this visa ban nonsense is actually challenging only for those Russians who are opposing Putin, or who want to leave the country, or just who want to go to see their relatives. But those who are close to Putin and those who are close to his elites, they already have permanent documents in the West. So the visa ban does not affect them, it affects us, it affects my mom. So for example, I cannot my mom cannot come to Germany to visit me, or it would be super difficult for us to do that. And in that case, we have to arrange meetings in the countries with visa-free regime with Russia. But unfortunately, these countries are the ones that have closer ties with Russian security services. So that actually jeopardizes our security. This is also something for the international community to think about. But At the end, I just want to say that we do understand that the main priority of the international community should be Ukrainians and their struggle, because they are victims, and the main resources should go to them. And if someone has something left, then of course we would be very grateful if international community would consider supporting our goal, just because we are striving to build a better Russia in the future, and better Russia means safer Russia for the rest of the world.
Yes, that's very true. And Irina, if I can finish up with you on the same question, what should the international community be doing to help the new Russian diaspora and emigres? Why is it important to help people like yourself?
It's important, firstly, because these Russian immigrants, they are liberal and they're pro-Western and they're friends of the European countries and the United States. So there's people who can promote liberal views in future Russia. And they're, of course, most of them, they're friends of Ukraine. And so there is no point to have bad relationship with your friends. As Olga already said, all immigrants, they experience a lot of difficulties with their visas, with their documents, and even visitors visa now. You can if you're in Russia, you can't get visitors Schengen visa, and you can't go to Europe. And for immigrants, that's very important, because their relatives there, all their families are still in Russia, and they need to see them. And even you wanted to leave Russia for Europe, you need visa. And because of some policy adopted by the Baltic states and some Eastern European states, we immigrants who live abroad, we can't go to the Baltic states. We can go to Poland, to many countries, because there was a crazy visa ban and for Russian visitors, and they call them tourists, but that's not right, because we are not tourists, and our relatives are not tourists. We are people who oppose the regime. We are people who keep going our job. We are independent journalists, we are activists, we are opposition politicians, if we are just liberal people who wanted to create a better Russia, the new Russia. And so what is the point to alienate these people? Why? For what reasons? I don't understand this position. And it seems it seems right now it's like it's like a very emotional state where share a lot of people in Europe, that Russia is the enemy. Russian people are bad because they have failed to prevent Putin from starting the war. And so we shouldn't care about them, even we have to punish them. What is this position? It is not, I mean, it's from on the one side, it is inhuman and it is illiberal, but on the other side, it is a little bit stupid. It is really very stupid not to support liberal, open-minded Russian diaspora in Europe and in the United States. But it's not about the United States. That's mostly about Europe. So as Olga said, Russian immigration needs a big program of support, like the programs which was implemented during the Cold War.
Great. Well, yes, I think all of you really made the point today why it is important to support Russian emigres like yourselves and the work that you're doing. And also, Izabella, the work you're doing. You have, I know, initiative with the Woodrow Wilson Center on supporting independent journalism. And I'm afraid we've really run out of time. I'm so sorry because it's such a great discussion. But I want to thank you all so very much for such an enlightening, and hopefully will make a difference in a lot of people's minds about why it's so important to support the work that you're doing. And Courtney, back to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, all of you, Olga, Irina, Izabella, Joanna. It's a really fantastic conversation, I think a really important one. So I'm very glad we're having it. For those of you who are listening, I really appreciate your tuning in because, as I said, this is a really important topic that's just not getting covered. Our next briefings, we have, as part of our deep dive on China on Monday, we have a discussion with Susan Thornton, and that will be from 12 to 1:15. That's part of our deep dive. If you'd like to learn more about our deep dive and how you can get more benefits than just the webinar, you can find out on our website. So that's one thing to keep in mind. It should be a really good way to get some more context. And our next member-only briefing is on Wednesday, the 15th, with Soner Çağatay, who will be taking us through the upcoming elections in Turkey and the impact of the earthquake. So thank you all for being a part of today's discussion. I think it's really important, really appreciate the time. And we look forward to hopefully seeing some of the listeners at our next events and, staying in touch with you and your work. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. It's really incredible. And I imagine it's a very, very difficult environment. So thank you for doing what you're doing. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good day, all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye.